My brothers and sisters in the Lord, in many countries throughout the world, the Christmas crèche is one of the most recognized symbols of this holy season. Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, the wise men, and the not-so-wise animals all cluster around a trough of hay with an image of baby Jesus as its center. Children have their first experiences of the crèche were once encouraged to ask questions after they were explained the significance of the symbol. And one young but wise boy innocently asked, if this is Jesus, when Jesus was born at Christmas, where Jesus was born, then where does Jesus live the rest of the year? It's a good question. Where does Jesus live for the rest of the year? Is there a special place where God can be found? Can any place or anything truly contain the presence of God? You know, by the time the Israelites returned from their exile in Babylonia, their experiences led them to the understanding that there was no place that God could not be. And in today's first reading, David, the greatest king of Israel, defeats his enemies and he builds this great palace for himself. And one day, David makes a decision that the Lord needed a more permanent house as well. And so David wanted to build a great and awesome temple for God. And at first Nathan agrees. Do whatever you have in mind, he says. But at night in a dream, God speaks to Nathan, and Nathan must return to David with a negative answer. Why? Well, you see, God didn't want a permanent dwelling place. God had traveled with them everywhere they went. The tent, you may remember, was with them always, and it was the easiest way for God to abide in the midst of the people. God in a tent could direct them and move them at every stage of their journey. That tent came to signify the consoling security of God's continual presence. Wherever they would go, God would always be there. Wherever they went, God was on their journey. And that symbol of the tent became one of the most symbolic and most significant symbols of God's presence with his people. We remember in the words of John's Gospel, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling, literally pitched his tent among us. In today's Gospel from Luke, we hear that beautiful story of another sign of God's abiding presence. Mary is the tent, the dwelling place for God. She is called to that same trust and that new direction that God was calling her to. Mary could conceive through the overshadowing of the Holy Spirit, that same Spirit that rested like a cloud over the tent of Moses. God became a child to fulfill the promises made to David. I will be with you always. It is mystery by which God reverses our human desires and even the normal ways of conception to lead us to the incarnation. And Mary was the first human dwelling place for the Lord. What about you and me as we prepare for the coming of Christmas? Should not, too, our lives, our very selves, be a dwelling place for Jesus, so that the Lord, wherever we go, and wherever we are, and whatever place we find ourselves in, can continue to touch his people as we heal, as we give comfort, as we console, as we forgive. Wherever we are, God will be. In our homes and workplaces, in our private and social lives, we are the instruments through whom God continues to dwell among his people. Christmas, then, is not just a time for remembering what God has done for us. It invites us to recognize how God asks us to be his dwelling place. Just as he asked Mary, will you bring my son into the world? He asks us the very same question. Mary answered, yes. What will our answer be?